They say offices have their own weather. Some places feel like summer all year, light and warm, where people greet each other with genuine smiles. Mine? Think February in Chicago, gray, slushy, with wind that slices straight through your coat. That was Whitaker and brand marketing, too cold for comfort, too predictable to be exciting. I'd been there 3 years, long enough to know the rhythm of the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the bitter bite of break room coffee, and the sharp sting of being overlooked. My name is Emily Carson, and if you asked me back then, I would have said I was doing fine. Which was a lie. I wasn't fine. I was restless. "Morning, superstar," Maya called out as I dropped my tote bag beside my desk. She was the closest thing I had to an ally in that office, a little younger than me, quick with sarcasm, always a touch rebellious in her floral blouses among the sea of gray suits. Superstar? I raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure I'm still background extra number 12 in this place. She grinned, sipping from her thermos. Not after last night. Word is Whitaker loved the concept you teased in the brainstorming session. You might actually get to run point on this campaign. My stomach fluttered, but I forced myself to act casual. He said that? Close enough. He said, and I quote, Carson had something worth exploring. That's practically a love sonnet in Whitaker speak. I laughed, even though my chest was tightening with excitement. I'd been grinding on this campaign idea for weeks, late nights, sketching on napkins during lunch breaks, perfecting every angle. For once, it felt like maybe, just maybe, my work was going to matter. Then, like clockwork, the human rain cloud strolled past. Jake Reynolds. Jake had been at Whitaker and Brand a year longer than me and never let anyone forget it. He had the kind of face that looked permanently smug, like he knew a joke the rest of us didn't. People called him confident. I called it smarmy. Carson, he said with a nod that was half greeting, half dismissal. Heard you had an idea yesterday. Yeah, I said slowly. Still working on it. Jake smirked. Well, keep at it. You'll get there someday. I wanted to throw my stapler at him. Instead, I gave a tight smile and turned back to my computer. Maya mouthed behind his back. The day crawled. Meetings that could have been emails, spreadsheets that refused to cooperate. But through it all, one thought kept me alive. Tomorrow, I'd be showing Whitaker my full proposal. My shot at proving I wasn't just another cog. That night, I stayed late, long after most desks had gone dark. The office was eerie at night, shadows stretching across cubicle walls, the faint hum of the copy machine like a ghost breathing. I laid out my slides, rehearsed my talking points, even whispered lines to myself as though the empty chairs were my audience. You've got this, I muttered, clicking through the deck. Bold, data-driven, consumer-first strategy. I could see it, Whitaker leaning back, impressed, nodding like I'd cracked some secret code. Maybe even praising me in front of the team. When I finally shut my laptop, it was nearly midnight. I left the office humming with nervous energy, not realizing that the storm had already started gathering. The next morning would change everything. The office felt different that morning. The usual drone of keyboards and printers was replaced by a low buzz, like the air before a thunderstorm. People were clustered around the conference room, whispers curling down the hall. Maya intercepted me halfway to my desk. Don't freak out, she said, which of course made me instantly freak out. What happened? She hesitated. Jake's in there with Whitaker. He's presenting. I frowned. Presenting what? Maya bit her lip. Your pitch. My pulse slammed in my ears. That's impossible. I stopped. Last night. I'd left my laptop on for a bathroom break, files open. Jake had been one of the last to leave, too. He'd walked by, smirking. No, I whispered, pushing past her. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I saw him, sleeves rolled, confidence oozing, pacing in front of a screen that displayed my slides. The title page was mine down to the font choice, the tagline, even the background image I'd agonized over for an hour. And by repositioning the brand as experience first, we captured the under 35 market while maintaining legacy loyalty, Jake was saying, gesturing like some TED Talk savant. Whitaker leaned back in his chair, hands folded over his stomach, nodding as though Moses himself had just parted the Red Sea. The world tilted. My fingers went numb. Maya tugged me back before I stormed in. Don't. Not yet. You'll look crazy. I swallowed hard, throat burning. But it's mine. I know. Her voice softened. But nobody else does. Minutes later, the door opened. Jake emerged to a flurry of back slaps from coworkers. His smirk found me immediately. Carson, he said smoothly, guess great minds think alike. My jaw locked so tight it hurt. You stole my work. Stole? He laughed, loud enough for half the office to hear. You had ideas. I had execution. Big difference. Whitaker appeared behind him, clapping Jake on the shoulder. Brilliant strategy, Reynolds. Exactly the direction we've been needing. I stepped forward. Sir, that was my... Whitaker held up a hand. Not the time, Carson. Let's be team players. Credit to the group. The humiliation hit me like a slap. My stomach dropped, and my cheeks burned hot. Around us, people averted their eyes, some sympathetic, others curious. Jake leaned close, lowering his voice just for me. Next time, Carson, move faster. The world doesn't wait for second place. It took everything in me not to scream. Instead, I forced myself to walk calmly to my desk, though my vision blurred. Maya followed, whispering fierce curses under her breath on my behalf. At my chair, I collapsed into the seat, fingers digging into the armrests. Breathe, Emily. Just breathe. Maya crouched beside me. He's a thief. Everyone knows it. I shook my head. No. They don't. To them, he's the golden boy. She grabbed my hand. Then prove it. Don't let him get away with this. Her words lodged somewhere deep inside me. I couldn't fight him here, not in the open. Not when Whitaker had already crowned him king. But I could wait. Watch. Plan. As Jake basked in his stolen spotlight, I made myself a promise, I would not forget this. And when the time came, I'd take everything back, with interest. Jake cornered me by the printer 2 days later, like he'd been waiting. You still sulking? He asked, leaning casually against the cabinet. Look, Carson, this is how the game works. You toss something out, someone sharper runs with it. That's business. I stared at him, the steady hum of the printer filling the silence between us. You didn't run with it, Jake. You stole it. His grin widened, the kind that made me want to scrub my skin raw. Stole? Please. You think the client cares who dreamed up the idea in the shower? Execution is what matters. And frankly, I'm better at it. I felt heat creep up my neck. You don't even believe that. You just think no one will call you on it. Because they won't. He shrugged, already turning away. You want advice? Toughen up. Stop whining and start playing offense. I stood frozen, fists clenched, as he strolled off. My whole body shook with the effort of not throwing the stapler I was holding straight at his retreating back. That afternoon, Whitaker summoned me into his office. His blinds were tilted half-closed, slanting the light across his desk like bars. I don't like the attitude I've been seeing from you, he said, adjusting his glasses. You're part of a team. If Jake shines, the whole department shines. With my work, I muttered. He sighed like I was a stubborn child. Don't make this personal. Everyone borrows, everyone builds on each other. Be a professional, Carson. I wanted to scream, to flip his neatly stacked files off the desk and force him to see me. Instead, I bit my tongue so hard it nearly bled. Yes, sir. Back at my desk, I caught whispers. A pair of interns glanced my way, then quickly ducked back into their conversation. By the time I hit the break room, I heard my own name tangled with the word jealous. Jake was seeding the narrative already. I was the bitter woman, the sore loser. I made it home late, exhausted and hollow. My apartment felt too quiet, the hum of the fridge too loud. I collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling, replaying Whitaker's words. Be a team player. Don't make this personal. As though having my identity stolen, my work stripped, wasn't personal. My eyes burned. Against my will, memories surfaced, my dad's voice, steady and low, teaching me to ride my bike when I was 7. I'd crashed over and over, knees skinned, palms scraped raw. You don't let a fall decide who you are, Emmy, he'd said, kneeling beside me with a band-aid. You get back up, even if your whole body aches. Because one day you'll ride faster than the kids who never scraped at all. That lesson had gotten me through high school, college, the lean years of unpaid internships. And now, in this suffocating office, it whispered again. Don't let them decide who you are. I sat up, wiping my face. Maya had texted earlier, don't lose heart. He'll slip up. We'll be ready. I typed back, I'm done waiting for him to slip. Next time, I'll make sure he falls. And as I hit send, a clarity settled over me. I wasn't powerless. I had brains, patience, and something Jake would never understand, the will to rise after every bruise. He thought he'd beaten me. But the game had only just started. I started small. A blind carbon copy to myself on every draft I sent. Timestamps logged in a private folder. Notes on scraps of paper slipped into the back of my notebook. Nothing dramatic, just a breadcrumb trail. If Jake wanted to keep stealing, I was going to make sure every crumb led right back to him. The first chance came quicker than I expected. A brainstorming session, Whitaker presiding like a weary judge, the rest of us tossing out buzzwords like candy. Jake sat across the table, his pen tapping lazily. Carson? Whitaker finally said. Anything from you? I glanced around, then leaned forward. What if we positioned the product less like a utility and more like a lifestyle choice? Tie it to rituals people already care about, morning routines, evening wind downs. Whitaker hummed, unimpressed. Jake barely looked up. The meeting plodded on. But the next morning, Jake strolled into Whitaker's office with a glossy one-sheet. From my desk, I could see the title, Ritual Integration Campaign. My stomach lurched. He hadn't even waited 24 hours. Maya messaged me from across the room, unreal. I replied, exactly what we needed. Keep watching. Because this time, I'd emailed the idea to myself the moment I left the meeting, complete with a timestamp. The evidence sat neatly in my inbox, silent but sharp. Weeks passed. Jake grew bolder, parroting my suggestions with that same smug delivery. Coworkers clapped him on the back, impressed with his originality. Whitaker started assigning him lead roles on pitches. But in the shadows, I was building my case. Every time I shared an idea, I logged it. Every time he repackaged it, I noted the date, the wording, the overlap. Screenshots piled up like ammunition. Maya became my quiet co-conspirator. You're turning into a corporate spy, she whispered one night over takeout at my place, scrolling through the folder I'd built. More like an archaeologist, I said. I'm digging up the proof of who really built this place. She grinned. And when you hit him with it? I pictured Jake's face when the ground gave way under him. He won't see it coming. But Jake wasn't stupid. One Friday afternoon, as people packed up for the weekend, he stopped by my desk. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "Not your usual, spirited self." "Busy," I replied evenly. His eyes narrowed. "Good. Because I'd hate for anyone to think you're, I don't know, bitter. Resentful. Those kinds of people don't last long here." I smiled, calm and sharp. "Then I guess it's a good thing I'm not one of those people." He studied me a moment longer, then gave a half smile and walked away. The second he was gone, Maya popped up over the cubicle wall. "He knows something." "Let him suspect," I said, shutting my laptop. "Suspecting isn't proof. Proof is what I have." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, adrenaline thrumming in my veins. The folder on my computer wasn't just evidence anymore, it was a weapon. And when the right moment came, I was going to use it. The trick was patience. Jake wanted quick wins, the spotlight today, the applause now. But revenge? Revenge was an art. It was slow, methodical, sharpened by time. And I had all the time in the world. I didn't have to wait long for the perfect opportunity. The firm had been chasing a whale of a client for years, Crestmont Retail Group. Landing them would mean steady revenue for at least a decade, not to mention prestige. The partners had circled the date of the pitch in red on the company calendar. Every department was expected to contribute something, but the lead was assigned to, of course, Jake. On paper, it made sense. He had the title. He had the smirk. But I knew his weaknesses better than anyone. Jake wasn't detail-oriented. He loved big words and shiny slides, but he never checked the fine print. That's where I lived, buried in the footnotes, the appendices, the places clients always noticed after the showmanship wore off. So I decided to sharpen those weaknesses into weapons. The first move was subtle. I volunteered to assist Jake with the background research. He loved the idea, someone to do the grunt work while he strutted. "Emily, you'll make me look like a genius," he said, grinning over the rim of his coffee mug. I forced a laugh, nodding like I was thrilled to be his sidekick. Inside, I felt a heat rise in my chest. "Oh, I'll make you look like something, Jake." I spent nights combing through Crestmont's old reports, public filings, even obscure press releases most analysts would overlook. I highlighted every strategic change, every planned expansion, every pitfall in their supply chain. But instead of handing it all to Jake neatly wrapped, I designed two versions. The real version, the one with the golden insight that could win Crestmont over, stayed with me. The Jake version looked polished, but I baked in errors. Not sloppy enough to scream sabotage, but just enough to crack under questioning. Wrong growth projections here. Outdated vendor data there. A case study that had already been debunked in industry journals. I almost felt like an artist painting in invisible ink. A week before the presentation, I arranged a little dry run in the conference room. "Jake, maybe we should test the deck on a smaller audience," I suggested sweetly. "That way we can smooth out any bumps before the big day." He leaned back, smirk spreading. "Look at you thinking ahead." "Fine. Grab whoever you want. I'm sure it's solid already, but hey, knock yourself out." "Perfect." I pulled in a mix of junior associates and one mid-level partner who always asked sharp questions. Jake strutted through the slides, tossing around buzzwords like confetti. At first, everyone nodded. But then the questions came. "Wait," said Mark, the partner, squinting at one chart. "Isn't this vendor bankrupt? Didn't they fold last fall?" Jake stammered. Well, Emily pulled that data." I smiled politely. It was listed in the quarterly report, but maybe we should double-check. Later, Jake, your growth forecast here shows 15%, but Crestmont themselves revised that down to 8% last quarter, one associate noted. Jake flushed, tugging at his collar. Really? Emily, must have been a misread on my end, I said smoothly, scribbling a fake note. By the end of the session, Jake was rattled, but not enough to suspect me. He just thought I was sloppy. Which was exactly what I wanted him to think. If he blamed me, he wouldn't review the material deeply himself. He'd still walk into the real pitch believing he had it under control. Afterward, he cornered me in the hall. Emily, you made me look bad in there. I widened my eyes, feigning guilt. I'm so sorry, Jake. I'll triple-check everything before the real pitch. Don't worry, I've got your back. He stared at me for a beat, then sighed. Just, don't screw it up again. Oh, I won't. The night before the Crestmont meeting, I stayed late, alone in the office. My real deck, the flawless one, sat hidden in my folder. The Jake deck was on his desk, ready to go. I imagined him clicking through it confidently, only to crumble under Crestmont's inevitable questions. The thought warmed me more than any blanket ever could. But my plan wasn't finished. The true revenge wouldn't come from Crestmont rejecting him. That would sting, yes, but it might just make the partners rethink the pitch. I needed the fallout to happen where it mattered most, inside our firm, in front of every single partner. So I made sure of it. The partners had scheduled a post-pitch debrief in the main boardroom, mandatory attendance. Whatever went wrong at Crestmont would be rehashed there, dissected like a cadaver on the table. And I'd be ready with the real data, quietly tucked away until the right moment to show what Jake had missed. Walking out that night, I paused by the glass doors and caught my reflection. Same neat bun, same tired eyes. But beneath it, something harder gleamed. I wasn't the obedient associate anymore. I was the one pulling the strings. And Jake didn't even know the game had started. The Crestmont boardroom looked like something out of a luxury magazine, mahogany table polished to a shine, leather chairs so deep you practically sank, and windows stretching across an entire skyline of downtown Chicago. It smelled faintly of citrus polish and expensive suits. I had been in plenty of high-pressure rooms before, but this one? This one had weight. Jake strutted in like it was already his. His tie was a little too bright, his grin too wide. He slapped backs, cracked a weak joke about traffic on the Kennedy, and dropped his laptop bag on the table with a flourish. Gentlemen and ladies, get ready to see the future of Crestmont retail, he declared, like a game show host about to give away a car. I slid into a chair a few seats down, notebook open, pen poised, the picture of quiet competence. I wasn't supposed to be presenting, just there to support. My heart thudded against my ribs, steady and electric. This was it. The first real crack. The partners sat stiffly at the far end, our managing partner Mr. Aldridge front and center. Crestmont's CFO, a sharp-eyed woman named Karen Bell, leaned back in her chair with arms folded. She had the look of someone who had already sifted through 36 pitches this month and was waiting to see if this one would waste her time. Jake launched in. Slides splashed across the massive screen, colorful graphs, bold headlines, his voice smooth with practiced confidence. For the first few minutes, I admit, he almost had them. He was good at theater. He knew how to throw energy into the room like sparks. Then came the questions. Hold up, Karen interrupted, raising one manicured finger. This vendor you're recommending, are you aware they filed for Chapter 11 in December? Jake froze for half a beat too long. His smile wavered. Well, our research showed. Karen turned to me. Didn't you assist with the background? I forced a small, apologetic smile. Yes, but I may have misread the filing. My mistake. Jake shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. He pushed ahead, clicking to the next slide. 5 minutes later, you've projected 15% growth for us in this region, another executive said. But we revised guidance down to 8. You didn't see the March update? Jake's face flushed pink. I must have overlooked. Another question. Another stumble. Another incorrect figure that unraveled under even modest scrutiny. With every correction, I saw Crestmont's eyes narrow, the partner's lips tighten. I took neat, quiet notes, nodding as if I was cataloging Jake's brilliance. Inside, my pulse hummed like a live wire. By the time Jake wrapped up, the room was ice. Crestmont's CFO tapped her pen against the table once and said, flatly, "Thank you. We'll be in touch." Which everyone in the business knew meant, "Don't call us." The walk back to the elevator was silent. Jake's face looked waxy, sweat gathering at his temples. Mr. Aldridge's jaw was set so tight I thought his molars might crack. Nobody spoke until we were in the lobby, the echo of our footsteps bouncing off the marble floor. Finally, Aldridge turned to Jake. "That was embarrassing." Jake stammered, pointing at me. It was Emily's research." Aldridge cut him off. "You're the lead. You own the work. Excuses won't change how Crestmont saw us today." He didn't raise his voice, but the disappointment in his tone was worse than a shout. Jake opened his mouth again, then closed it. He looked like a child caught stealing. On the cab ride back, he sat stiff beside me, fuming. He leaned close, whispering through gritted teeth. "You set me up." I raised an eyebrow, tilting my head. "Excuse me?" "Don't play innocent," he hissed. "You made me look like a fool in there." I gave a small laugh, shaking my head. "Jake, you had the slides. You had the deck. I only supported. If there were mistakes, maybe you should have reviewed them more carefully." His glare could have burned through steel. "You're not smarter than me." I smiled thinly, turning back to the window. "Oh, but I am." Back at the office, the storm gathered. The partners called an emergency debrief for the next morning. I could already picture it, every partner in the boardroom, Jake on the hot seat, the Crestmont disaster dissected inch by inch. That's when I'd bring out the real data. That's when the noose would tighten. But that night, as I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop glowing in the dark, I realized something: Crestmont's rejection wasn't enough. I wanted the humiliation to spread wider, to ripple through every corner of the firm. Jake had taken credit for my work for years. He had stolen hours of my life, siphoned away my ambition, humiliated me in front of colleagues. Now, I wanted him to know what that humiliation tasted like. Not just in front of Crestmont. In front of everyone. So I began rewriting my real deck into something new. Something airtight, dazzling. Numbers so precise and insights so sharp they'd cut glass. And I would wait, patient as a hunter, until the partners asked who could have saved the Crestmont deal. And then, with the sweetest of smiles, I'd give them the answer. The boardroom felt more like a courtroom that morning. Everything gleamed: mahogany table, glass walls, the city skyline a hard gray backdrop. 12 partners sat in a deliberate semicircle, their notebooks open like judgment waiting to be recorded. My palms rested flat on the table, cool and steady. Jake stood at the head, tie knotted too tight, voice pitched higher than usual as he began his grand performance. For the first 20 minutes, I let him talk. He clicked through slides, his words confident but hollow, dressing up weak numbers with flashy graphics. He thought the rhythm of his voice would carry him through. But I could see the tells, the faint sheen on his forehead, the way his fingers twitched against the clicker, the careful avoidance of eye contact with certain partners. "Projected revenue growth sits at 22% next quarter," Jake declared, puffing up. I leaned forward, tone polite but precise. Actually, that figure was adjusted down to 16 after the latest market correction. The corrected report was circulated 2 weeks ago. Head swiveled toward me. A flicker of doubt rippled across the table. Jake's jaw tightened, but he forced a laugh. Well, Emily's right, there was a minor adjustment. But the trend still holds. It was death by 1,000 cuts from there. Each time he glossed over a number, I slipped the scalpel in, quiet, factual corrections, no flourish, no venom. Just truth, laid out so cleanly the room couldn't ignore it. Client renewals at 85%, Jake announced. 71, I corrected softly. Projected savings at 12 million. Closer to 6.5. Each correction was a pebble, and by the time we were halfway through, the avalanche had begun. Partners started directing questions past him, to me. Emily, can you clarify how you reached that number? Emily, do you have the updated data? I answered calmly, pulling up the files I'd memorized, citing dates, names, timestamps. Jake's smile curdled into something jagged. His collar looked tighter with each passing minute. Finally, I slid a slim folder onto the table, pristine white against the dark wood. If it helps, I prepared a full reconciliation of the discrepancies. Every claim in this deck has been verified. The room fell quiet. One partner leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Jake, did you not review this before presenting? Jake swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. Of course I did. Emily's, she's just being overly cautious. I looked him dead in the eye, voice smooth as glass. Numbers don't lie. People do. The silence after that line stretched. Long enough for Jake's face to flush red, for one partner to shift uncomfortably in his chair, for the truth to settle like a stone dropped in deep water. Jake tried one last play. You know, Emily's been gunning for my position for months. She's spinning this to make herself look good. It's personal. Cold air seemed to crystallize around us. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. If it were personal, I wouldn't have brought documentation. The data speaks for itself. And then, without any drama, I clicked open my own presentation. The slides glowed crisp, precise. Side-by-side comparisons of Jake's numbers against verified figures. Dates, audit trails, client statements. Every line a scalpel, every detail a stitch sewing his credibility shut. The board leaned in, pens scribbling, nods passing quietly from one end to the other. The more I spoke, the smaller Jake became. By the 5th slide, his hands were fists on the table. By the 8th, he was staring down at the wood grain, jaw locked. When I finished, I didn't smile. I simply closed the laptop and folded my hands. That concludes my review. One of the senior partners, a man notorious for cutting through nonsense, set his pen down. Thank you, Emily. That was thorough. Jake, I think we've heard enough. Jake opened his mouth, but the room wasn't his anymore. The air had shifted. The authority was gone from him, stripped piece by piece, and the silence pressed down until he finally leaned back, defeated. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at him. I gathered my notes, slow and deliberate, as the partners moved on, discussing timelines, strategies, all with me at the center of their questions. Jake was a ghost at the table, present but irrelevant. By the time the meeting adjourned, the verdict was clear without being spoken. He was finished. I walked out first, heels clicking against marble, posture steady. Not triumphant. Just precise. A scalpel doesn't cheer when the surgery is done. It simply cuts, clean and sharp, and leaves silence in its wake. The week after the board meeting was supposed to feel like triumph. In a way, it did. People who used to glance past me in the hall suddenly stopped to offer congratulations. A junior analyst I barely knew whispered, "You crushed him," as we passed each other near the elevators. Even clients began looping me into emails instead of Jake. It was validation. The kind of quiet shift that meant the tide was turning in my favor. But with Jake, victories never came without fallout. At first it was little things, documents I needed suddenly misplaced, meeting invites accidentally left off my calendar. One afternoon, a client call I was supposed to lead mysteriously vanished from my Outlook, leaving me scrambling to dial in halfway through. Jake's voice was already droning on by the time I joined, smooth as silk, like he'd been waiting for the chance. "Glad you could finally make it, Emily," he said, the smirk audible even over speakerphone. I bit the inside of my cheek, held steady, and carried on with the numbers. But the seed was planted. He wanted me to stumble. Then came the whispers. I'd catch the tail end of hushed conversations when I walked into the break room, my name, followed by a quick subject change. An assistant who'd always been friendly started avoiding eye contact. During one client dinner, an executive leaned over his glass of wine and asked, too casually, "So, Emily, you ever get nervous that someone might embellish their success?" I smiled like it was nothing. Inside, my stomach dropped. Jake's fingerprints were all over it. The cruel part was how subtle it all was. No direct attacks, nothing you could pin down. Just shadow and suggestion, eroding trust one rumor at a time. At home, the isolation pressed harder. Friends texted less, claiming busyness. Even my sister asked, "Hey, you okay?" I heard something weird about work. She wouldn't say what, and I didn't push, but I knew. Jake's reach had slipped past office walls and into my personal life. The breaking point came late on a Thursday. I'd stayed late, piecing together a quarterly report, my office floor almost empty. As I walked past one of the smaller conference rooms, I heard it, my name, spoken low but sharp enough to freeze me mid-step. "Emily. She's the one they're looking into." I stopped, breath caught. Another voice whispered back, muffled, then clearer. "Yeah, an ethics complaint. If that sticks, she's done." My hand clenched around the folder I was carrying. I didn't move, barely even breathed, straining to hear more. The voices dipped again, conspiratorial, then silence. Chairs scraped, and I ducked quickly down the hall, pulse hammering in my ears. I forced myself to keep walking, shoulders squared, every step steady even though my blood had gone cold. An ethics complaint. Fabricated or not, that was the kind of poison you couldn't ignore. Jake hadn't just been chipping away at me. He was preparing to bury me alive. And in that moment, calm on the outside, storm inside, I knew this wasn't survival anymore. It was war. I should have felt stronger after the boardroom ambush. Instead, the walls of the office felt closer every day, the air tighter, like someone had stolen half the oxygen. It began with whispers. Conversations that went silent the second I walked into the break room. A laugh cut short. An email chain I was accidentally removed from. People didn't meet my eyes the way they used to. Even Rachel, who had once been my sounding board, kept her distance now. She didn't avoid me outright, but she didn't linger either. Her smile felt rehearsed. That Friday night, I stayed late finishing reports. The office was empty except for the cleaning crew on the far side of the floor. I left my desk for 2 minutes to grab a coffee. When I came back, my chair was pulled slightly out, just enough to notice. On my keyboard sat a single folded sheet of paper, perfectly centered. The note was typed. No handwriting to trace, no personality to catch. Just black letters on white. "We're watching. Careful where you walk after dark." I stood there, the fluorescent light overhead buzzing faintly. Behind me, the hallway light flickered once, like a bad horror movie cliché. I wanted to laugh it off, but the sound caught in my throat. My hands were clammy against the paper. For a long moment, I didn't move. The cleaning cart squeaked somewhere down the hall. I imagined footsteps behind me, imagined Jake's smirk at the end of the corridor, imagined his friends leaning against the walls, enjoying the show. My rational brain whispered that it was just intimidation. Office bullying turned theatrical. But another voice, the one that kept me awake at night, asked what if it wasn't? What if Jake wanted to break me enough to risk something darker? I shredded the note and flushed it in the restroom. My fingers trembled as the paper swirled down. I didn't want to give whoever wrote it the satisfaction of seeing me carry it home, seeing me keep it like a talisman of fear. But the image of it burned behind my eyelids. Every time I stepped out of the building after dark, I glanced over my shoulder. Every engine rev in the parking garage made me jump. My apartment windows, once a comfort, now felt like targets. By Monday, the paranoia had me scanning every cubicle for signs of intrusion. A pen slightly out of place. My mouse angled differently. A faint smudge on my monitor that hadn't been there Friday. My logical mind screamed I was overreacting. My gut told me otherwise. I tried to confide in HR. They were polite, clinical. They asked if I had proof. I didn't. They asked if I felt unsafe. Yes, I said, and their faces stayed neutral. We'll document this, they replied, like I was another checkbox on their protocol list. Document. File. Forget. That night, I lay in bed with my phone clutched in my hand, waiting for it to buzz, to ring, to flash some evidence that someone was out there. Nothing came. The silence was worse. By Tuesday, something hardened in me. Fear had burned through me like acid, but what was left felt sharp, metallic, almost surgical. Jake wanted me cornered. Whoever left that note wanted me doubting shadows. They thought fear would slow me down, make me sloppy. But fear, I realized, was clarity. Fear stripped everything away until there was only truth. And the truth was simple, I couldn't wait for another note, another flickering light, another polite dismissal from HR. I couldn't wait for Jake's next move. I had to strike first. Cold. Clean. Final. I stared at my reflection in the black glass of my office window that night. My eyes looked different, harder, sharper. Your turn, Jake, I whispered. The boardroom smelled faintly of polished wood and burnt coffee, the kind that had been sitting on a warmer too long. A row of glass walls led in the winter sunlight, sharp and sterile, catching the chrome edges of the table. I slid into my seat at the far side, across from Jake, my notebook open, pen steady. The whole executive team was here, 12 pairs of eyes, some bright with curiosity, others guarded. This was supposed to be a strategy meeting. Instead, it became something else entirely. Jake adjusted his tie, his movements deliberate, calm. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the exact mix of warmth and gravity that made him so dangerous. I want to take a moment, he said, hands folded neatly on the table, to talk about something outside of numbers and projections. I felt it before he said the words. The prickling in my chest, the shift in posture around the table, the way a few heads tilted with interest. Jake leaned slightly forward. It's about Emily. My pen froze above the page. He smiled, soft, almost paternal. We all know Emily's passion for this company. Her energy has been undeniable, her commitment, remarkable. But sometimes, passion can be a double-edged sword. A slow ripple of discomfort passed around the table. No one interrupted. Jake went on, his voice measured, heavy with false empathy. I've noticed, and I think some of you have too, moments where that passion edges into volatility. Emotional strain. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We've all been under pressure, and sometimes, the pressure shows. And when we're talking about leading at the highest level, he exhaled softly, as if it hurt him to say it. Stability matters. The words hit like a slap, but he delivered them like a prayer. I felt the eyes shift toward me, curious, searching. Was I frowning? Was I biting my lip? I gave them nothing. Across the table, Mark, the one who'd once vouched for me, the one who'd told me privately he thought I had the sharpest mind in the room, lowered his eyes. He said nothing. And worse, when Jake glanced his way, Mark gave the faintest, most poisonous nod. Betrayal in silence. Jake folded his hands tighter, his gaze sweeping the room. I want to be clear, this isn't a criticism. It's concern. We're a family here, and families look out for each other. Maybe Emily just needs space. Time. Maybe a chance to recalibrate before taking on such heavy responsibility. It was masterful. Soothing, almost tender, while pulling the rug out from under me in front of every decision-maker that mattered. I swallowed my fury, my throat dry as paper. Every cell in my body screamed to lunge across the table, to shred that smile off his face. Instead, I wrote something in my notebook, slowly, deliberately, noted. Then I looked up, straight into his eyes, and smiled. The silence in the room thickened. No one leapt to defend me. Not a single word. Jake leaned back, satisfied. To everyone else, it looked like concern. To me, it was a blade slipped neatly between my ribs. But here's the thing about knives, if you're steady enough, you can pull them out. And sometimes, if you're patient, you can place them back exactly where they came from. I closed my notebook, folded my hands, and waited for the meeting to end. The day of the presentation arrived with the kind of stillness that sets nerves on fire. The boardroom was larger than any I'd faced before, glass walls giving a panoramic view of the city skyline. Sunlight glinted off polished chrome, sharp and almost blinding. Every seat was filled, executives, clients, even a few journalists invited for the quarterly briefing. And of course, Jake, smug in a tailored suit, seated front and center, like he owned the room. I walked in carrying my tablet and a slim folder, the weight of it negligible compared to what it held, months of meticulously gathered evidence. Every manipulated spreadsheet, every misrepresented email, every whispered rumor from the past weeks, catalogued, cross-referenced, undeniable. Jake's smile flickered when our eyes met, just for a heartbeat. That tiny pause, he knew instinctively that I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. I took the podium, my voice calm, controlled, practiced. Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to talk about accountability for our decisions, our actions, and our results. Heads turned. Jake shifted slightly, tensing. I tapped the tablet, bringing up a slide. Graphs, memos, timestamps, each piece a thread in a web only I could see. In reviewing our last quarter, I continued, I noticed some irregularities in data reporting that could have impacted client trust and internal operations. A few murmurs ran through the room. Jake's jaw tightened. He leaned forward as if to interject. I held up a hand. Please, let's review the facts before assigning blame. Slide by slide, I laid it out. Every manipulated email Jake had sent, every subtle misdirection he'd engineered, every whisper campaign, all traced back to him. The evidence was cold, surgical, and impossible to dispute. I glanced at him finally. The smug calm he had carried into the room was gone, replaced by a flicker of panic he couldn't quite hide. Jake, I said softly, though the room caught every word, it's crucial we maintain integrity. And integrity means transparency. I tapped the tablet once, and the last slide appeared, screenshots of him, carefully marked, showing where he had misrepresented figures and spread misinformation. The silence that followed was thunderous. For a moment, no one moved. Jake's lips parted, a protest forming, but I didn't give him the chance. I let the room speak for me. The faces around him shifted, confusion, shock, disbelief. Even his closest allies hesitated. Then the subtle coup, Mark, my supposed betrayer, spoke up. Emily's right, he said, his voice steady. I overlooked some of these signs before, but the evidence is clear. Jake's eyes widened. Betrayal in public, the ultimate humiliation. The board murmured. Clients whispered. The very people he thought were his audience now questioned everything he had ever claimed. I closed the folder, set it on the podium. My gaze swept the room, every glance precise, every inch of attention mine. Accountability isn't about who falls first, I said, it's about ensuring the company stands strong. And it will, now, without compromised leadership. Jake tried to speak again, but his voice sounded thin, ineffective. The room had already made up its mind. He was finished. I stepped down from the podium, walking toward the glass doors, each step echoing. The sunlight caught my hair, highlighting the calm in my expression, the cold fire in my eyes. The whispers, the looks of awe and relief, followed me out. Outside, I paused and looked back at the boardroom. Jake's figure was small, cornered, trapped by his own arrogance. I allowed myself a thin, satisfied smile. The world would remember this day. And they would remember me. Some revenge stories fizzle, some fade quietly. Mine? Mine was surgical. Precise. Unforgiving. And from here, there would be no whispers, no doubt, no shadow of betrayal left to haunt me. Only victory. But victory alone wasn't enough for me. They had to feel it, every ounce of pain, every ounce of fear. So I made sure the trap snapped shut while they were still standing tall. Their bank accounts? Frozen. Their partners? Turned against them. Every secret they buried, every lie they whispered, I dragged it all into the light for the world to see. And then I invited them to watch it unravel. The boardroom, once their kingdom, turned into their public execution. Their so-called allies stared, silent, while the empire collapsed. I didn't just take what they loved, I made them live through losing it. Every headline screamed their downfall. Every whisper carried my mark. They begged for mercy, but mercy was never on the table. This wasn't revenge meant to sting, it was meant to scar. So deep, so permanent, they would never heal from it. And Jake? He was the centerpiece of it all. His smug confidence shattered as every truth spilled into the open. Humiliated in front of everyone who once respected him, he was stripped of his position, his reputation burned to ash. No company wanted him. No partner trusted him. The man who once mocked me now begged for scraps of dignity. His wealth drained, his properties sold off one by one, until nothing was left but the hollow shell of a man. And when the dust settled, Jake had nowhere left to go, but a shelter house. From a corner office to a cot under flickering lights. That was his empire now. I didn't need to raise my voice. Silence was enough. Silence after destruction is louder than any scream. This wasn't just revenge. This was savage revenge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more such savage stories.